hand or something, and if John, you could look at it
Yeah, I'll do
and
that.
then I.
All right, so it's floor's open to you. You can share your screen. Away you go.
Cool. All right. So um, here we go. All right. So yes, everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Yes. Great. So today I am gonna uh, introduce Hotwire, and I've been playing with Hotwire. Um, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I've been playing with Hotwire recently for a presentation, also because it's quite a new thing at Rails, and I've put up this presentation to explain what Hotwire is and how you can start using it. And as Sean mentioned, you can ask me any questions during the presentation. Through the presentation, we are going through four things. So first, we're going to look at what Turbo Drive is. Then we're going to look at what Turbo Frames are, and then what Turbo Streams are. And we will end up with a slide or two about tips and tricks that I have observed or got through my dive into Hotwire. When we talk about Hotwire, it's really three things. It's Turbo Drive. It's also Stimulus, which is the JavaScript framework that Rails is use, which is like a modest JavaScript framework that is more a replacement of jQuery. And then there's Strata, and Strata is not released yet. We don't really know what it is, but I think it's something along the lines of how to link your web views with SDKs, like for mobile apps, so that you have like hybrid apps for iPhone and Android. And so today we are going to look at what Turbo is, and Turbo comes in three sections, which is drive, frames, and streams. Um, but first, let's go to hotwire.alexbarrett.com and have a quick look about how this works. So you should put your name and then click join, and please come onto the website with me. And so here, the idea is that you can see that once users are connected, you can display the users. There's no refresh coming up on that page, and you can vote about those questions. And as you vote, and as other people vote, you should see the progress bar starting to update. And if someone's brave enough to create a question, you should see also questions, new question coming through, and then people can start voting on them as well. So, uh, do you take cold showers? Right, and so up, and now we have a new um, question, and so that's pretty much like the types of things that you can do with Hotwire, and it's the idea of trying to get a single page app feel using WebSockets and having some interactivity with your app. Yeah, so you can keep playing as I go if you want to. But I'll just continue on the slides for now. And so first is this Turbo Drive. And Turbo Drive is really what I think is just a revamp of Turbo Links. So it watches for link clicks and form submissions, perform them in background, and updates the page without doing a full reload. So if you're familiar with Turbo Links, really Turbo Drive is the same API, and that's oh, can you send the yeah, it's on the bottom of the
Oh, just that
of
one.
the yeah, on the presentation. It's yeah. you can just connect to it. Yeah, so I'm not going to go through Turbo Drive because that's Turbo Links, and that's not what really is fun about Hotwire when we think about Hotwire. But however, there's Turbo Frames and there's Turbo Streams. And Turbo Frames, it's a bit hard to get your head around it at the beginning, and the documentation is quite succinct, but it's really like there's no it's really precise, and I couldn't find another description than what's on this slide, which is come from the documentation, but I'll try to explain it as I go through the different aspects of turbo frames. So turbo frames allow predefined parts of that page to be updated on request. Any links and form inside a frame are captured, and the frame contents automatically content updates after receiving a response. Regardless of whether the server provides a full document or a fragment, we will see later, containing an updated version of the request frame, only that particular frame will be extracted from the response to be replaced to the existing content. And so you can think of turbo frame as a HTML tag that captures a fragment of HTML on your page. And any links that is within this, when you click on it, only that frame will start to, the navigation will only happen within that frame. So navigation in a frame will be contained within the frame unless told otherwise. And so maybe I'll show you what I mean by the frame. So where is it? Is it on question index? Everyone can see my my code, yes. So, oh, and actually, maybe it's even better. We could. I'm going to give the answer there, but see there here. This is the what we call the turbo frame. So it's just a HTML tag called turbo frame that has an ID and has a target or a source. And here we can see that we have one turbo frame for the list of users. So knowing about like partial rendering and like the containment of things, and because we're kind of familiar with React as well, I guess, I have in this slide, which is the page that we see there, a quick question: how many frames do you think this page is using? So in chat, maybe you can give me a number of frames that you think we are using for this particular page for it to work the way we are using it right now. Anyone has an idea? One per question, 8, 3, plus frames inside for each element, plus one more, 13. All right, so I guess, yep. The question, the answer is, I mean, I've counted types of frame and not like actual frame, which probably Thong is correct with if we look at each instance. But there's in this page, like we can talk about like 4 different frames. There's one for the users there, and I've made the users request slow so that you can see that it's fetching in the background while the rest of the page is rendering. So one use case for frames is to make some load some data that would probably be expensive, and instead of blocking the whole rendering of the page, you delegate that to its own request, and then you can update the HTML. So that's one frame, and you pass the source as I showed, and then it will show you the users. Another frame that we're using is for the submission of a question with the form. That's its own, like we encapsulate this in one frame. Then we have the number 3, which is because it's an index page, you have a frame that wraps the whole collection. And then for each individual question, they are all wrapped around a frame as well. Um, I guess the difference between 3 and 4 is that if you append a new question or if you create a new question, then it will target the frame number 3, and number 3 will append that question onto the page. Whereas frame type number 4 is more like when you update the question itself. Let's say we change the title and we are listening for updates on questions, then the title will be updated. We actually re-render the whole question, but with the updates. And so this is about frames. And um, at this point, I was going through the demo again, but I think it's important, based on the feedback I had last month, that I go through the streams as well. And so when you think about streams is live updates. So it's handled by WebSockets, right? There's a WebSocket connection between your client and your server, and the server will pipe updated HTML that will be then put onto the page. And streams allows you to establish the connection with your server from the client. And streams, when you send through streams HTML, you send templates, and there's 7 types of templates. So in there on this page, I wonder if we see see here, turbo cable stream source. So this is the stream tag on the HTML page, and on the code, here is one, for example, turbo stream from questions, which is different than the tag for the questions. There's the turbo frame for the question, and then you have to add another tag to establish the connection, and they just happen to have the same name for conventions. So when you pass updates through the WebSockets, there's 7 types of template, as I mentioned. And so we're going to go through them before I go back onto explaining the difference between frames and streams. Before that, I will talk about Redis and how TurboStreams is handled. And so TurboStreams and Hotwire is using what's called Action Cable, and Action Cable has been introduced in Rails 5. And for it to work, I thought you needed Redis, when in fact Redis is just a data store for the data that you pass through the WebSockets. Let's say you have multiple instances of your app, and so that all the data is synced together, you need some sort of transit data store. And so one way to do it is through Redis, and Redis is, I guess, the recommended store, but there's also an adapter for Postgres, and I guess you could use Postgres to manage your channels. And I'm not really like super confident about this aspect, but for the app that you see, it's hosted on Heroku, and I have a Redis store that is linked to the cable configuration for Action Cable to work properly. There's 2 other adapters. One is inline and one is async, and I think none of them are recommended for production. It's more for development or for testing. And I've got this from the Heroku documentation about, and apparently Action Cable uses rack socket hijacking. And I'll let you read the rest, because this is not something I'm really familiar with. But one thing to mention as well is that I learned that for each instance of your Rails app that you deploy, you will have Action Cable on one of the process, and you can run individual Action Cable servers, like just on their own without the rest of the app, just to manage your WebSocket connections. So if you have scaling issues, you could also just like you would do for workers, you can do it also for Action Cable. And so now we're going to go through the 7 types of templates that you can pass through your WebSockets or through your response for the page to update. The first one is append, and this is the template that the layout. So you always have you have the action, and then you have which frame you want to target on your page. And so maybe you can inspect on the app to see which one we're doing, but there's probably one frame with a target of questions. And then you pass your HTML in templates. And so now Turbo knows what to do with it, and they will look for the message and then will append to that HTML tag this bit here. The same thing with prepend, and so it's a little bit like JavaScript, kind of, and the way we used to do things with jQuery. But yeah, so same thing here. You will prepend your message one from the message HTML tag. Then there's replace, and so this will take the HTML tag with the ID message one, remove it, and just replace it, which is different from update. And update will look for the HTML tag with the ID, remove the inner HTML, what's inside, but leave the actual tag and replace the content. And this is really useful when you have, let's say, listeners, like JavaScript listeners on their document, and you have those IDs, or like you have like, I don't know, like you listen to some events on that specific tag, then you just replace the content and don't replace the whole tag, which then might cause like some bugs with your app. I had this bug, and I switched from replace to update, and now it works. And I'll show you what I'm talking about this. Then there's remove. So from the target message one, so it will look for the ID message one and just remove it. You don't pass a template because you just remove the whole tag. And so in the app, if we had a delete question and we would pass this template, it will just remove the question. Then before and after, I haven't got the chance to use them, but I guess if you have a tag, then you put it just before it or after it, but not before or after within the tag, but outside of the tag. So those are the seven templates. And so now I'm going to go through the code and try to explain the differences and how you can implement Turbo Hotwire to your app in an incremental way. So if we go through this, right? So if we go to post, post is the basic implementation when you want to start with Hotwire. And so I haven't gone through the how you install Hotwire. It's documented on the Git repo. You run reg tasks and then do something on your JavaScript bundle or something. But once you have Hotwire installed, if you look at my post index, you can see that the tags I have is one on posts, and I have one that is for this link here, which is the second one, new post with Turbo Frame. So this link here is contained or wrapped with a Turbo Frame, whereas this one there is not. And if we look at our post controller, come on, you can see that it's probably just raise G scaffold. There's nothing about Hotwire in there. It's just a normal controller. So what I've done really is wrap the frame on the form and wrap the frame on the post. And so without Turbo Frames, you click there and then you go to a new page. Let's say you add your post. Then this is just like standard Rails. Once you use a frame around the link, remember, anything that is clicked within a frame is contained, the navigation is contained within it. So if I click there, then what you see is that the form appears. And so this form here, it's exactly the same as this one. But because this one is also wrapped around a form, what happens is that we fire a request to get the new form, the where's my mouse? Where's my mouse? We fire a request to this fella, right? Which renders exactly this. But because it's within a frame and Turbo kind of do like its magic, from the page, this whole page, it will only get the form because that's the thing that is wrapped under a frame with the same ID. And we render it in here, and that's it. And so if I add another another post, what we are doing here, and that's because I got this thing say, don't do anything special, just redirect to the page. When we submit the form, then we go on to the create, and the create goes back to redirect. So here, there's no refresh on the page. We just append the form. Whereas when I click here, create post, there is actually a redirect on the page. But that's the simplest way you can start to use like asynchronous or AJAX requests to like do stuff like this. Does anyone has any questions so far? All right. Now I'll go on to, by the way, same with edit. So edit is also contained within a frame. Where is it? Post index. Ah, maybe not. No, it is. Ah, yeah. Ah, right. Yes. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, post also wrapped under a frame here. So the index, this is the post. And so again, we hit the edit page, but because we only have the form with the same ID, we show the same form here. And so that's why we get that form. Whereas if we were using without those frames, if I click edit here, I go back to the edit page. This is the thing that is a bit hard to get at the beginning, but once you pass by that, I think it's way easier to get into it. One thing to understand is that if you want to update a few things, and let's say I update this one, if I got my mouse to work, where's my mouse? Yeah, and I update it. Again, you can't update 3 and 4. It's equivalent to the one that I've just updated because we have a redirect, and then you lose any changes that you would have done there, for example. Yeah, so that's one way to start using turbo frames.
But you wouldn't normally do it that way. You'll have it so it's rendering, replacing only the contents of that particular frame, right?
So yes, and we're gonna go through that, but you need a little bit more work to make just that thing, and that's why we're going with the articles page. So the articles page, now we are using so the articles controller looks like this. When you do like request or when you click on links within a frame, if you have a new format, which is the TurboStream format, then you can start to do updates, as you mentioned, Peter. And so in this example, the form, when we submit it, we can like see the validation, but we can also start to update things individually. And so if I start to create, like this bit here is not touched, I can destroy this one, can update this one here. And so all those actions are like done on the background asynchronously, and then we render this turbo stream format that will just update the thing within this frame. And so I think I need to show the views for this one. That's articles.
So
yes.
turbo stream format is a special sort of a special sort of format. It's not just an XML HTTP request or JSON or anything like that.
Well, I think it's just the DSL, the API, but it's like if you have like a format HTML, you would do .html.erb. If you do a turbo stream format, you would do .turbostream.erb. And basically, this is the one for the create. So the create happens when I create a new article. And what happens here is that it goes onto this format because when you submit a link or a form within a frame tag, it appends like on the header a certain format, which is the turbo stream format, and it has a certain name. I don't remember. I should have put it that. But then when you have those templates, this is a lot of HTML. But what I'm saying, really, it's those two things. One is prepending the articles with the new article that's been created, and we update the form with a new partial for the form. And so when I do this, here when I create, it's going to prepend the article and it's going to render a new form. And that's what's happening. Just to be a bit more explicit about things, we could remember those templates that I showed previously. We could return exactly this, and it would do the same thing. Like, I mean, it's hard coded, but you get the idea that those methods there, helper methods, are basically creating those HTML tags and those partials. And so here you got the action update on the new article, and that's the form that we are going to update. And knowing this, you could definitely not necessarily have a server. You could just have a static website, and you have a link within wrapped in a frame that targets a page that just renders this, and that would also work. You know, like those are just helper methods. And so we have a string here. We don't have a one update. And I think this is it. And so really this, it took me a bit of time to realize, but it's not different than what we used to do with remote. When you have like this .js.erb, but instead of the turbo stream prepend, you would have something like JavaScript or jQuery get the form replaced with this new partial, and that's exactly what it's doing, but with the new syntax. One thing to realize is that while we are using the stream format, we are not yet using the stream tags for articles, and so there is no WebSocket connections. And this is presented with this, Alex. Okay. If I go on the article again, and then I add one, let's say a new article, right? And I create it. The new article shows up on this page. It doesn't show on this page. There's no live updates because there's no WebSocket connections yet. So you can still have like this single page app feel, which is, you know, like, it's pretty amazing what you can do already without even WebSockets and without Reddits and Action Cable. Those are the things that you can start doing just with frames and the format TurboStream. And now we're going to go on to the last phase, which is the live updates. And so in this example, the only difference with against the articles is that now I'm also establishing WebSocket connections. And so same idea, you can update things. But now if I add this, it's also shows up on the other page. And this is the closest you get from the demo app that we have at the beginning. And if I destroy, I can destroy one, I can update it. If I do this, yeah. The only difference as well is that to stream through WebSockets, those updates, the difference is now see on the create compared to, let's say this one. So this is the comment with the live update. This is the one I showed previously. Here we have a TurboStream format, whereas here we don't have one. We don't have one. No, we don't have a TurboStream format. And so the way we stream it is that there's two ways to stream through Action Cable. There's probably more, but the two ones that I've seen is you need to either do it always, all the time on as a callback on your active record. So here you say broadcast the comment to the comment stream and insert it by prepend. There's a whole like different options that you can do, and you should go and have a look at the documentation for broadcasts too. There's more like this is the standard way, you know, like comments with Perl and stuff, but you can definitely do some adjustments there. And broadcast deals with updates, create, and destroy. So not like for any of those types of updates on the record itself, you will broadcast those. If you wanted to not broadcast the destroy, you would have to just broadcast, update, and create, I guess. But that's all possible. And so this is always broadcasted. And so I'll show you at the end of the presentation how this can work. Because let's say we're here and there's a reg task running somewhere in the background and updates those comments. You will still get those live updates. You don't need to be on this page. Once you broadcast it, wherever on your app, at some point there's an update for the comment, it will be broadcasted on this page. And if you want to broadcast different type of contents onto different pages for the same comment, this is where it gets a bit tricky and you need a little bit more work on it. But I'm pretty sure it's possible. The other way to broadcast, if you don't like necessarily to do it on the model, is you can do it on the controller. And so this is what's happening for the users at the beginning here. So the users first, the index here, I'm slipping 2 seconds, but then I show all the users that are connected. And for every user that is newly joining the page, I'm here broadcasting through the controller. And here you see it's TurboStream broadcast to logins. I'm not necessarily the difference, like the difference between target and just this is a bit weird to me, but yeah. Put the user into that partial and then send that to the page, and this gets then updated in there. And if you log out, then it's the same here. Turbo broadcast remove, and then you will be removed. So if you close your page without logging out, you will stick forever on the list. This is how live updates works. So you need to broadcast and you need to establish the connection, as I mentioned at the beginning. And to establish a connection, you use this helper method, which is TurboStream from comments. Yes. So that was probably a lot. and anyone has questions.
That was impressive, Alessandro. Thank you very much for preparing all that. That was really nice walkthrough.
Thank you. I still have like a couple of slides, and then you can thank me again.
I'll do that, and I'll wait for my questions then. Go for it.
So what is Hotwire? And like Hotwire is an alternative approach to building modern web applications without using much JavaScript by extending HTML. Yeah, one thing that I didn't show in the code is actual JavaScript, right? Even though the TurboStream format, I think it's just a replacement for what we used to do with JavaScript. There was no JavaScript in there. And instead of passing JSON, you pass HTML fragments that then gets updated on the page. And so Hotwire uses those three libraries, Turbo, Stimulus.js, and Strata. And my guess is that TurboFrame and TurboStream tags, helper methods, are run with Stimulus in the background. So Stimulus probably have already like some libraries developed to know what to do with the response once it's done. And so that's probably Stimulus that is handling that. But if you need more interactivity, you will need to use Stimulus as well. And then Strata, as I said, I'm not really sure what Strata is. It hasn't been released last time I checked. And so Stimulus and Turbo are just libraries used on the front end to enhance the navigation, lazy load, and establish WebSocket connection and update page based on the backend response. Conclusion, I'm excited about Hotwire. Why? I'm glad you asked. It didn't, I mean, you know, like I like to do side projects, but it didn't take me that long to put on Heroku a working app. And so it's achieving this SPA feel without the split of the backend, front end, and all the overheads that comes with it, you know. And so like for a team of one or two small teams, this is something that is really attractive, I would say. One thing that I think will probably improve code over time is that because you can now have bits of HTML that are isolated and you fetch or you do multiple requests, you will start to think again about your routes and your resources. And so instead of having one dashboard page that will show everything, you have a dashboard page that will render empty, that can probably be cached, and the same for everything, but then fires all those either expensive requests or those small resources that you want to show. And so now your dashboard shows, let's say, questions, then you just hit your questions controller, and it's more like crowd instead of having this big dashboard control that will do everything. And also, if it's really expensive to render the dashboard page through the controller, and takes, let's say, 400 milliseconds, because you're now firing 4 different requests to fetch all the data, and all of them takes just 100 milliseconds, then you render your whole page in 100 milliseconds. So it's also faster. And I guess I just covered it allows better caching and reduced response time doing this way. Questions? Yeah. So I'm open for questions. I have questions myself, and so it does still feel a bit magic sometimes. And I probably won't be able to answer all your questions. But I have a few questions when I did the app. And for example, on the question where you were all voting, there's no like restrictions to users. So when we broadcast a question, we broadcast a question to every user, right? But if you have some sort of like scoping for some of the resources, then you will probably need to append, like create channels that are user specific. And I didn't cover this in this thing. I think it's possible, but then there's also like maybe like some security that I don't know if it's been covered. Like if you change your channel name on your own, like is it encrypted? I don't know. Can you like put another user ID? But yeah, you can like, how do you scope updates per user or per resource? This is a question I have, and I didn't cover that within a month. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just sort of
Cool.
see where there's anywhere that you said it like it's giving you single page app functionality, but clearly a lot simpler without the split. Do you see there is some limitations to that, or you think that actually that creates a whole new, runway ahead of us where you don't need to have a React or Vue front end?
This is a difficult question, and I struggle with it because I don't necessarily like the split front end back end, and so I think this is great, especially because when I do side project, I'm on my own, and I do that, and it makes me fast, right? The reality is that it's also more established now, the split front end back end, and so while it will suit some teams and perfectly, just the way that it's difficult to find front end dev and it's difficult to find back end dev. Maybe the split is it will still be predominant, but it's early days. I'm sure there's some bugs and stuff, but it's pretty exciting, and I've totally I'm totally on board with passing HTML instead of JSON. Is it something that will happen in the future? I think maybe companies will still want the split anyway, and so how is that gonna like this is not necessarily what it's good for. Yeah, you're not rendering your DOM virtually on the client, so it's all about passing HTML. I don't know if I answered your questions, Peter. I'm sorry.
Alex, there's kind of another dimension to it as well, though, because, as you said, you can get a lot of those kind of responsive feelings out of some of the earlier technologies, even TurboLinks, which originally included WebSockets, and then they cut it out and they said most people don't need that. Let's just do it. That's enough to give you that immediate responsiveness that you get from not reloading the entire page, although you're still doing round trips to the server. So that's halfway. The part that you get with the WebSockets thing is not just that you see the changes that you have made to the page, it's that you see everyone else's changes as well. So if you're looking at something which is like a multi-user system of some kind, whether it's an app interface or in DHH's case, it's probably a chat room or your tickets or whatever like that, as other people do things, those get broadcasted to streams that are shared, and then everyone else sees those updates. So the UI updates. So even in an SPA or a native mobile app, you don't normally get that.
That's true. That's right. Yes. Even with a split of a React app, you would still need some WebSocket and some updates be broadcasted to the other clients. That's yeah. That's a really good point. Yep. Yeah. That's me. Maybe it's a bit long. I'm sorry, John, but yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Alex. Really good.
Well done, man.
Thanks, Alex.
All right. Next, we've got Thong. He is going to talk to us about services, presenters, and finders. So, Thong, you're on mute.
Thanks, Alex. That was an awesome presentation. Let me click the button.
That's nice to meet you. You are there, Tommy.
I'm just trying to figure out how Google Chrome works with presentations. It says I need to give it
box
permission.
with the arrow going up at the bottom.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I was saying I needed more permissions, but apparently share a tab is fine.
I can't see you.
Okay, so this is luckily this is a quick chat about services, finders, and presenters. At least how it's used. Gitlab. I'm an engineer, backend engineer at Gitlab, by the way. And Gitlab is a globally distributed company That's basically GitLab is a DevOps platform, and it's written in Rails. And this is about how we use services, service objects, finder objects, and presenter objects at GitLab, the code base, which is open source, by the way. So there's a few links in the presentation you can see to actually view some of the code that I'm presenting as well. This is some information about myself. If you want to contact me after this, happy to chat. So the first thing off is that a lot of this talk, you don't necessarily need it. Like if you stick with what DHH wants, you can get pretty far with the stock standard model view controllers. So this is there's other things inside app as well, but you can see later on. There's a few more things in GitLab's app directory. I'm assuming everyone's familiar with models, views, and controllers, right? Or do I need to kind of expand a little bit more on what that does? Silence means yes. Okay. Yes, yeah, just based on everyone's introduction, I think so as well. Just keep moving in the interest of time. So how GitLab uses service finders and presenters. I'll start with each of them. Basically, we have to talk with each of them and why we use those. As I said, like you don't necessarily need to use them in your application. Like you can get away with plain controllers, plain models and things, right? But what's interesting about this link is also that it talks about how you should use services and finders and presenters as well. So I think it's a very good resource. And definitely encourage you to read it. But let's look quickly. Let's look at each things individually. First up is services, and I think this is the most useful one out of the three. So why you want to use a service in that? The reason why you want to do that is that you have code in a controller that you want to start reusing in other areas. So for example, you have similar functionality you want to expose as part of an API. So within GitLab, we use Great to write our APIs, our REST APIs. And say, for example, we have a thing to update a cluster and you have a controller for that. And you want to expose the same thing for kind of a REST-based API. So you want to kind of reuse the code instead of copying and pasting the same code. Obviously, you want to encapsulate that in its own object. And that's what the service class is. And it's normally of the form of service dot some service class name dot new. We pass in the current user for authorization purposes, and then we pass in the params as in the request parameters, and then we execute whatever arguments you need to execute for. So it's usually something dot execute as a thing. I guess this execute thing is a convention that someone taken on from the old Java days of noun execute things. So I guess it's a convention that you can adopt as well. We explicitly say we won't use call, and that's another option as well. So something dot call, because I think it feels too close to like lambda and proc calls, and that's just confusing for no benefit. So we'll stuck with execute. Yeah, everything. Is that kind of make sense? Yep, I see notes. So like there's a few kind of like discussion points or thoughts. Like obviously you can use services, whether or not you want to use services. But if you want to reuse that, that's cool. The first thing that you might want to ask yourself is, what should your services do, right? You don't, like, one of the big problems that I see, or I experience in the past, you don't want your services to become the new fat model, for example. So you don't want your services to become the thing that executes everything, or the thing that does everything. So it's not that, right? It performs a very specific function. And other kind of like questions you want to kind of answer and discuss with your team is like, and decide whether can services call other services, and can models call other services. So in GitLab, we decided that yes, services can call other services, that's okay, but models definitely cannot call services. Like that's completely wrong abstraction. In the same way that models don't call controller code, right? So and we actually enforce that using a robocop thing. And the other thing is that you can, as I mentioned, like services is a good place to kind of enforce authorization rules as well. So do consider that, because like you want the same consistent authorization when the API calls the same code, right? So have to think about that. So the next thing is finders. So a finder object is used sporadically in certain things. Sometimes we just use normal Rails scopes, like some scope, some Rails class, some Rails active record model dot scope, and then that's fine. But as time runs by, your model code gets accumulates with all this finding code, and this is where we use finder objects to extract out this finder related concerns. And in GitLab, it usually returns a list of records, like an array, or it returns an active record relation. Again, it's usually of the form of something.new. We pass in the current user, so we can authorize, like, here's a list of things that you can see or can't see based on whether you're an admin or maybe you're not an admin, or whether you're not a member of the project, for example. On the right here, I forgot to mention there's some example code, like how you will use finders. So you can see like there's a lot of this complicated examples that complicated long pieces of code that would belong less in models, and you can extract that out into its own finder object. So I did mention like finders versus scopes. I find that we use both a lot in GitLab. So it's a matter of like judgment whether you need a finder object or not. Like as a general rule of thumb, I think if you need authorization, you need to kind of decide like whether this user can find this code or not. And finders is probably a right thing to do rather than passing in the current user to your model code all the time. Another question is whether can finders call other finders. That's something for your team to decide, but like GitLab decided not, because the main reason is that it makes performance, just debugging like where did this query come from, just infinitely harder. So we decided like we don't do that. Any questions so far, by the way?
Thong, could they be allowed to reuse these objects if they need to do a whole lot of work up front before that? Can they be executed multiple times with different parameters?
Which objects are we talking
well, like
about?
if you had a service, like, because I think you showed that you had some parameters passed to the initializer and some to execute. Are you allowed to call execute more than once and pass it different objects?
Yes. Yes.
And what about finders?
It's the same as well.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's not consistent. You find that in some older code, like we kind of mix up like what gets passed in the initializer and what gets passed into the execute. But the idea is that what gets passed into the initializer is something that you initialize once and then you can co-execute multiple times as well. So it's quite rare that we use that. So not often that we co-execute multiple times. And then the last object that we use in GitLab, there's other object, but we won't talk about it, is presenters. This is used less often. So most of the time we just use the object itself, like a project object, project model. But sometimes if there's like you get kind of complicated logic in your views, then a presenter is the ideal kind of way to extract the logic out of views. I won't kind of talk a lot about it because I think this is the most understood object, I think. Like if you know the decorator pattern, this is essentially kind of what the presenter is. And at GitLab, we have two forms of presenters. One is a simple form of presenter. It's just an object that calculates certain things based on the model that you pass in. And the other form is the decorated form where we delegate methods that the presenter doesn't know about, it delegates to the underlying active record. So on the right here, we can see like there's a method, there's a project presenter, and it exposes a default view kind of method. So instead of having that in either a view or in the model, God forbid, we extract that into its own presenter object. And on the top here, you can see how it's used. Like it makes the kind of view much simpler.
Hey guys, out of the way.
So
Daddy's having a meeting.
So in terms of like presentations, hang on, let me just move my location. So can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Mike's my camera loose. So in terms of like gotchas here, I think the major thing is whether or not you want to use that as a replacement for view helpers, and I recommend that you don't, because there's a temptation, which has happened recently actually. There's a temptation to start including, say, link to or any action view helpers into it, and then start using like link to as a kind of a top level method inside your presenters, and that's actually really bad. A violation of single responsibility principle, because when you include, say, the link to helpers, the URL helpers, you're including 40 methods into your presenter, and your presenter is now a big ball of mud, to put it not nicely. So if you need kind of view related stuff to calculate all that kind of stuff, I recommend continue using view helpers. Presenters is more to kind of calculate the methods that are not view related, not view layer related, more the logic that is related to your application. So let's use a Gitlab. I see kind of less presenters used, and we use more services and finders more. If you look at this link, there's kind of a big, not big, but kind of a good summary of all the discussions that we discussed about the pitfalls of using view helpers, and when to use presenters, and how to use them as well. Yeah, so is that kind of make sense for presenters? You have any questions?
Might have to do some reading.
Yeah, and that's the end. Thank you very much.
Hey, Thong, I was interested in your, you showed us your directory structure at the beginning.
Yes.
Under your app folder, you've got common things like models and views and controllers and JavaScript and a few other little things. Has your organization or anyone else here, have they started going down the line of trying to break apart your application into domains of any sort? And then, if so, have they started that at the app directory level, or are they, or is it some other way? Like where I'm working, the app folder has got many folders in it.
Yep.
Not just models and views and controllers and services.
Yep. Yes, we have started going down that route. My computer froze. Hang on a minute. What's going on? Okay. Let me show you that the model directory that I just showed you was just a very stock standard Rose app, by the way, that just had model views controller. If I show you, why is my keyboard not working? So there's something wrong with this MacBook. Blame the antivirus software. If I go to Gitlab, so this is the app directory structure that we have, and you can see there's a few more things than the standard things. There's active action cable, there's controllers, finders, GraphQL, models, policies. I didn't talk about that at all. Presenters, serializers is for kind of the API to serialize models into JSONs. And we have services, validators. So if you click into services, for example, yeah, we started down the route of kind of splitting out all the domain kind of concepts into folders, into namespaces. So that's the start of it. But we're still kind of at the level, we're still kind of using the Rails way of doing things. So we're not separating into like app domain, and then everything related to the domain is within that one folder. Like we're quite far away from that. So what's happened is that if you see like alert management, for example, this namespace is also, or this directory is also present in app presenters if you have an alert management related presenter as well. So we started kind of enforcing that, and this year I think like new classes should be within some sort of domain namespace and shouldn't exist in top level namespace. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. No, it's just interesting the approach because, you know, we have a lot of business concepts as our domains, you know, employees and evaluation cycles and whatever, and so they're at the very top level, and then we break things out underneath that. And I think it was sort of possibly in keeping in mind that possibly Rails engines might be used as something in the future to have sort of subdomains within your application.
Yes.
So, but obviously we haven't landed at that point yet. But I was just interested to see how different organizations or different people structure their top level there. Yeah, folder. Yeah.
I haven't finished, but I've read an article about Shopify doing this work right now, and it's ongoing work. It's been for 2 years, but they are doing exactly what you are mentioning there, and it's not an easy task or a short task. It's been 2.5 years, I think. They've started with one article. They've got a new progress with this new article that was published recently. It's an interesting read if you're doing this in CultureAmp at the moment.
Yeah.
Was he using Rails engines?
I haven't gone through the thing, but I've seen some comments that says that Shopify was leaning towards Rails engines. Yes. But don't quote me on this. Yeah, it's quite a piece of article, and I haven't finished it.
Yeah, I remember discussing in the GitLab issue about adopting Rails engines as well to kind of separate things out. There was some enthusiasm and some hesitancy because Rails engine is a very complex thing, and I think it's sort of all dormant right now because there's other things to do. But yeah, that's definitely a direction.
There's also the Anami framework that is built with this idea of having multiple apps within your framework, and you extract your domain into libraries and have different apps that you could have. But then Anami is still early days, I think, and it's not as complete as what Rails provides. But there's this idea built in with Anami.
Yeah. My thought on that is that like there's Hanami and the other one which is Dry, I think Dry RB.
Dry RB, yeah.
Those are great. Like if you're just starting out, but if you're existing thing, like it's really hard to justify the time and the effort to kind of ditch what you have already working into a completely new thing. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have a question about services and sometimes you know, like we want to make a service and then we want to do something that is kind of similar, and so I was wondering, how do you tune your service scope? Like, do you have multiple servers that do similar things, or do you have a service that kind of can be reusable. I'm not asking this question right.
Right. How do you reuse the services?
Yeah, I guess how do you reuse services, and if some actions needs to be doing the same things but not exactly, how do you deal with that?
Right. That's a very good question. And that's definitely related to like you don't want your services to become the new God object. For sure. And how we do it is that we just lib folder, lib GitLab folder actually, and you just separate out your services into plain old Ruby objects that does whatever you want. And then if you have a very similar thing, a very similar service, then you would use those plain old Ruby objects. So instead of a service just calling, I mean, okay, obviously the first thing is that if it's different by slightly things, then you can just say pass in a parameter, pass in an option thing, and then call something. That's fine. But if it's kind of similar-ish but different control flow, for example, what I would recommend is that you create like the specific domain plain Ruby classes. We do it in lib/GitLab. For example, if I click into this, for example, like you can see, like we just have a payload thing here that creates, makes the class, does some parsing, and the temptation is to put this in a service, but I would say no, don't do that. Just extract this out into its own thing, and then have the two different services just call this instead. Does that make sense?
Yep, totally. Thanks.
Ooh. Does anyone else have other questions? Oh. Not then I'll let you
And
on.
Thong,
Yes.
is GitLab playing around at all with Hotwire? Or is anyone else playing around with Hotwire?
No. I think some people tried it. It's great. I see a great future for it. But we require strict front and back end separation. We use Vue.js, by the way. So yeah, it'll be quite a while to port all of those back again. So we'll see. Is anyone else using Hotwire? For Peter's question. You want to chime in?
Yeah, I am, or I'm starting out, integrating it in at least 2 different projects. So we'll see how it'll go. I'm not that far into kind of like implementing anything, but I must say, like the one thing that I quite enjoyed. I don't know about you, but when TurboLinks was released, I think it was something like Rails 4.2 or something, where when TurboLinks was released to the public, I kind of like tried it. I dropped it into an existing project, and it broke all my jQuery, and everybody else on the team tried it, and everybody walked away, kind of like turned our back on it. And since then, every time if you ever got lucky to run Rails new, the first thing people did is throw out TurboLinks. So the first thing, you just remove it. And then, this React and whatnot happened, and we all understood, okay, this thing needs some sort of JSON API, and we need to engineer it for it to work. So there was never kind of like the question, can I just use my jQuery just like that? We all knew, like, you have to create wrappers around it, or you have to put a lot of work into making it work if you kind of like transition an old code base into whatever framework you chose. So, but TurboLinks, and this is something that I realized in migrating one of the projects, is it required the same attention. You had to re-engineer some of your widgets on the front end just to make them TurboLinks or TurboDrive compatible. But the upside is you basically drop it into an existing code base, and just let's ignore breaking jQuery widgets for a moment, instantly you just get faster page navigation. And it just that alone is kind of like actually amazing after like, you know, working on other apps that actually did have this split between front end and back end. And you kind of like work hard for this single page app feel, if this is what you want, and if this is like the hard requirement. But then revisiting Turbo Links, Turbo Drive, just drop it in and you just got it. You know, for the most part, you just have it there and it just does what it says on the tin. And then you just have to redo all your jQuery widgets, I guess, or, you know, refactor it to use what Alex showed us today, turbo frames, for instance, or similar. But yeah, still at the beginning, I have like an ambitious plan to build like a page builder thing where multiple people will be able to create pages and edit it at the same time. For little Reggie, that is, for some internal tooling. But yeah, learning along the way, and we'll see what comes out of it.
Cool.
We're not using Hotwire at Deliver Easy, but we do have a bit of Action Cable, and I think there's two separate sets of concerns. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of us got burned by TurboLinks in version 1 because it was effectively Hotwire. It had all that WebSocket stuff, so it had all the complications of WebSockets, plus all those complications about getting rid of page loads all in one go. And I think for most of us here, we've found since then that the current TurboLinks is kind of okay, especially if you're using Stimulus. It does basically drop in and work. Yeah, you'll need to move some things that you used to do on load to doing particular page events. I'm pretty nervous about Hotwire. I think it will be quite a while before that's sort of robust again. And we still haven't deployed Action Cable out to our customers. There's still some concerns about stability and stuff. So I don't know how long it's going to take for Hotwire to get stable enough that most of us would be like, yep, we can put this in and it will only make things better. It's not going to cause any flakiness or problems. I wouldn't use it for a big site in version 1.
Yeah, I kind of like agree, or I have similar thoughts about production. So I'm still not sure about, you know, how well it will scale, and I asked some questions in the Ruby Slack. So this is like my personal worry. You know, when do you hit like some cap where you need to consider like how you architecture things so that they do scale better? I'm definitely not there yet to even really work on this.
The numbers I've been hearing.
It is one concern in general. And one thing that Alex didn't mention or wasn't mentioned today is there are alternative implementations for Action Cable itself, because Action Cable, which is implemented in Ruby, is probably expensive. So there's any cable, which is essentially an Action Cable implementation in Go, which probably uses way less memory and is also faster for certain things. But yeah, this is like a concern that, or something that's on my mind. How well does it scale, or at which point do you have to throw machines on it, and how much will it cost you?
The numbers I've been hearing is sort of in the ballpark of like between 5,000 and 10,000 users per server, which is a problem for some people, but not for most of us. But I think just like the complexity of making sure it all operates robustly as you do things like deploy and turn over your servers and all that kind of stuff, there's just a little bit more to do that probably most of us can't be bothered with for most sites. I don't know.
Yeah, having said that, I mean, the whole WebSocket approach really gives you new ways of doing things, right? Like, I mean, even your React, Vue, Angular apps, they don't necessarily use WebSockets. So WebSockets is really this idea that the server pushes updates to the client. And there are not that many apps using that at the moment, or I haven't used that many apps that kind of like use that. The thing that you see sometimes is being able to edit, let's say, a document at the same time. And more apps implement this, but not that many apps I've been using over the past few months actually implement something where more or less everything on your page can be updated and you notice that. So this is the new, I would say, this is the new bit, the exciting bit about Hotwire, that we do have like an ecosystem of tool stream and helpers and whatnot to make this seamless, integrate this more or less seamless. But yeah, whether or not it will scale, or other issues that you run into when a lot of people start using this actually, yeah, remain to be kind of like seen and experienced, I guess.
At Gitlab, we started deploying action cable just for the sidebar to tell you like live update who is assigned. It took about a few months, I think. It's not me, someone else is doing it. Can link the chat. So it's live actually. I think the major concerns was like just the amount of memory that it was using because we need to start new instances, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. I see. I added a link, and I see that inside that there's an option. There's consider using any cable, and that has gone nowhere yet. So maybe there's something with mine. Cool. I got to drop off now. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Thong. That was awesome.
Right.
All right. Do we have any other questions for Alex or any other things? I'll take that as a no. All right. So I'm going to stop.
Did you get?
Stop the recording?
Oh yeah, I was about to ask. Did you get to record the presentations?